It was on a dark street in a respectable suburban neighborhood that the thing first made its presence known, a murdering creature of Satan that hacked away parts of the body to build another with the stolen organs. See Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, and Peter Cushing, three masters of the macabre in Scream and Scream Again.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're going to make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Thank you for joining us on American International Podcast. I'm Jeff Markin.
I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And this week, we're back at the drive-in, so please keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times. We wouldn't want anyone to lose a limb as we watch the science fiction horror mystery Scream and Scream Again from 1970.
Scream and Scream Again was directed by Gordon Hessler from a screenplay by Christopher Wicking, which was based on the book The Disoriented Man by Peter Saxon. It was produced for American International Pictures by Louis M. Hayward and Amicus Pictures by Max Rosenberg and Milton Subotsky, and it was distributed by Anglo Amalgamated and American International Pictures.
Scream and Scream Again stars Vincent Price as Dr. Browning, Christopher Lee as Fremont, Peter Cushing as Major Benedek, Alfred Marks as Detective Superintendent Bellaver, Michael Gothard as Keith, Christopher Matthews as Dr. David Sorel, Judy Huxtable as Sylvia.
It also stars Anthony Newlands as Ludwig, Kenneth Benda as Professor Kingsmill, Marshall Jones as Conrads, Uta Levka as Nurse Jane, Jutta Stensgaard as Erica, Julian Holloway as Detective Constable Griffin, Judy Bloom as WPC Helen Bradford, Peter Salas as Schweitz, Clifford Earle as Detective Sergeant Jimmy Joyce, Nigel Lambert as Ken Spartan the Jogger, and the Amen Corner as themselves.
Scream and Scream Again opens with a man getting off a double-decker bus, and he starts jogging towards us as jazzy music plays. He continues jogging right through the opening credits.
As the big stars' names come up, the action freezes, and as the credits end, the jogger, in some distress, collapses.
He awakens in a hospital bed. A nurse enters the room. She places a tray at his bedside and straightens his blanket. The man tries to speak, but the nurse puts a drinking tube in his mouth. Then she exits, leaving the tray next to the bed.
The man, starting to remember what happened to him in the park, pulls back the bedclothes to reveal a missing leg, and he screams, just the one time though, and then he lays back down.
Meanwhile, in an unnamed fascist country in Central or Eastern Europe, a man is in a car and he's going through a military checkpoint. He's asked to show his papers, then he's sent forward, where he's asked to do so again. This time he's made to leave the vehicle and is thoroughly searched. When the car clears inspection, the border guard welcomes him home. Then he throws down a folder highlighting their not quite swastika symbol.
It's 3 arrows pointing upward in black on a white circle, which is itself on a red field.
It looks kind of like if you shattered a swastika and those are how the pieces landed.
You get the idea. This man is Conrads, and he goes inside to a room where another man is shaving. This is Schweitz. Schweitz is getting ready for a committee meeting. Conrads hands him some plans for a weapon which he liberated from their enemy, whoever that may be.
But Conrad seems to know too much about this operation, K718, and Schweitz stares at him. That information is privileged, he says, and he wants to know how Conrad's found out about it. Only he and Major Benedek know about it. Schweitz picks up the phone and attempts to place a call to Benedek, but Conrad tells him that him knowing about the project is to their mutual advantage. He points at something on the document while reaching over the man's shoulder. He pinches his shoulder in a way similar to a Vulcan nerve pinch, but unlike a Vulcan nerve pinch, this kills the man.
It's not a stunner. Now we're at a crime scene back in England. A young woman lies bloody and dead in a field. 2 cops examine the body, then go compare notes with 2 other cops. We hear one say that the victim's name is Eileen Stevens. Detective Superintendent Bellaver is in charge here, and he starts delegating tasks to the others. We wonder if some kind of weirdo did this. Bellaver gets in a car as a reporter asks him, "Is it murder?" "Don't be so bloody stupid," he tells the journo.
Bellaver has his driver take him to visit a Dr. Browning. Once there, Browning's assistant answers the door, and once Bellaver identifies himself as the police, Browning's assistant lets him in and goes off to fetch Dr. Browning. Soon thereafter, Dr. Browning, who looks a lot like Vincent Price, enters and asks what this is about. Bellaver says it's about Eileen Stevens and asks Dr. Browning if he knows her. "She works here," says Browning. Then Browning asks if she's in trouble. What makes you say that? asks Bellaver. Well, you'd hardly be disturbing me this time of the night if she wasn't, Browning replies.
Bellaver asks Browning if Eileen had a boyfriend. Dr. Browning says he has no idea, and then he tries to figure out where she's from. London? Browning thinks that she was from the north. Browning asks what she's done. Bellaver curtly tells him it's more like someone's done her. She's dead. Her throat cut.
Dr. Browning looks shocked. Perfectly dreadful, he says. But Dr. Browning says he will help them however he can. He remembers taking a call for her once, when a girl called. I don't think we're looking for a girl in this case, interrupts Bellaver. She wasn't just murdered, if you know what I mean.
Now the medical examiner is reporting on the body of Eileen Stevens. There's bruising and edema around the eyes, lacerations of the cheek, jugular vein cut repeatedly, a violent sawing done. There are vaginal contusions, punctures on the right wrist, scratches on both breasts. Professor Kingsmill asks for a scalpel, but his assistant, Dr. Sorel, can't stop wondering what her last thought might have been.
Kingsmill tells him that once the transition from living person to corpse is complete, it's best not to confuse the two. And now we're at the police station, and Bellaver is going through operations with some of his men. They're going to log Browning's statement.
Bellaver tells one of his lackeys to check on Browning's record, and then tells another to go through the girl's address book.
But Bellaver's latest mystery involves a sandwich. It looks like cheese, it smells like ham, but it turns out to be chicken. As this is going on, he discusses with one of his men that they've been looking for patterns in the killings of young women that have been going on recently.
Bellaver says there's no motive to a sex crime apart from the sex, which we know better now.
Then Bellaver goes into another room where Dr. Sorel is waiting to provide Bellaver with the autopsy results. Sorel starts playing back Professor Kingsmill's tape, but Bellaver just asks for the highlights. So Sorel tells him that her skull was crushed, but the cause of death was the severing of the jugular vein and the blood loss from that. But of note, there were 2 puncture wounds on the woman's wrists.
She'd also been strangled brutally. Bellaver asks Sorel if he has any theories about those puncture wounds, and says that it could have been a meat skewer or knitting needles. Bellaver recounts all the injuries to the victim and says it doesn't sound like a sex crime at all. Psychopath? asks Sorel, and Bellaver nods. That's about it. And they're the most difficult to catch. They just have the animal compulsion to kill.
Now we're back in that room where the jogger is lying in that hospital bed, and the nurse comes in again. Nurse, he asks? What are they doing to me? He asks this repeatedly, but the nurse says nothing. She just straightens his blanket and sticks the nozzle in his mouth before walking out again. The man sits up and throws down the blanket to reveal that he now has no legs. He screams again.
So that's the scream and scream again? They weren't consecutive. And now a couple of German hikers, apparently, a woman and a man in lederhosen, are climbing a mountain. 3 soldiers wearing those same fascistic insignias watch them while sitting in a jeep. After they watch for a short while, they drive towards the couple climbing the mountain. They shoot the man, who falls to the ground. The woman holds up her hands and begs them not to shoot her.
And now we're at the holding facility where the woman is being kept under guard. Conrads is there and he goes in to speak with and interrogate her. She's sitting on the floor in the corner. We can't make her tell us why they were escaping, the guard informs Conrads. Conrads addresses her directly. Your lover, I have to tell you, he is dead. She says nothing, and the guards haul her up to the chair. Conrad silently grabs her face. Then he picks up a piece of chicken from the table. He takes a bite, then he pulls out some wire cutters to break the chicken bone. Don't worry, you will tell me, he says. You will. As the guards grab her hand and hold it in front of Conrad's. We close in on her as her eyes go wide, and she starts to scream. Then we cut away to a man screaming into a microphone.
It's the lead singer of the Amen Corner, wailing the movie's title song at a club in London as young people shuffle on the dance floor. One woman makes eyes at a man dancing. This is Sylvia, and her friend encourages, backhandedly, her to go for it. She says he'd never go for her, but why not? The man temporarily vanishes from view, but they spot him up on a balcony overlooking the dance floor.
So Sylvia decides she's going to make a play for him. She goes up to him and asks if he's going to buy her a drink. He's not, but he does hand her the one he's already holding.
Gross.
How about going for a ride, he asks. So now Sylvia is in the strange man's car, and they're enjoying a flirtatious ride with the car's top down. He even lets her handle his gear shift.
Things get physically flirty between the two, but there's no dialogue. The man pulls off the road into a deserted area, and they start snogging, but she pulls away and says, not here. He doesn't stop trying to kiss her, so she gets out of the car to run. Not sure where they are, but it seems to be some sort of park with buildings. She gets out of the car to run, and he follows her. He pushes her against a wall. She says, you don't have to hurt me, but he does.
Yeah, this guy likes to play rough, so he starts flinging her against the wall. He scratches her face and rips her dress.
She breaks away and he chases her. He catches her again and she tries to defend herself and hurts him, but she can only run a little bit of ways before he catches her again. And then he viciously attacks her.
And now we're with Major Benedek, who is played by Peter Cushing, and he is utterly appalled. He has just gotten word of the prisoners and what Conrads has done to them.
He's with a minister from the government and a woman in a white lab coat. She says that technically they were Major Benedek's prisoners, not Conrad's.
Benedek says that Conrads has his place, Sometimes it is still necessary to instill fear to get people to cooperate with them, and the story about it has been trickling out, and this could become an embarrassing political situation for them.
The minister says that he's usually sympathetic to military order, and Benedek says, and that's why we allowed you to remain in power.
Then Major Benedek receives a message that Conrads has come to see him, so Benedek clears the room so the two of them can speak alone. Benedek greets Conrads by saying, "The man and the girl. You tortured them?" "I interrogated them," corrects Conrads. Benedek acknowledges the sound of cheering outside, saying that they sound happy enough.
Thanks to their methods, they convert dissidents. They don't punish them. Torture, though, is just torture.
He mentions how Conrads has moved up following Schweitz's death, but he calls him Salas, which is the actor's name. But they cannot condone Conrads' methods. Benedek informs Conrads that he's being removed from his duties. Conrads asks for an opportunity to explain, putting his arm around Benedek, once again applying that nerve pinch, killing him.
And now Peter Cushing's cameo in this film is over. At the police station, Valerie, friend of the recently murdered woman, is trying to help the police with a composite of the man at the club.
She's working with a flip book of different eyes, nose, and chin types, and having a lot more fun with this process than she probably should be.
Bellaver happens by, and one of his men tells him that all men look the same to her. Bellaver tells his man, Detective Sergeant Jimmy Joyce, that they're going to try something spectacular to flesh out the killer, so he should round up some pretty volunteers. As for Bellaver, he's going to the mortuary now. Joyce goes into an adjoining room and finds a nice-looking policewoman. This is WPC Helen Bradford. He tells her that he's got a job for her, a beauty parade.
Now we're back in the room with the hospital bed and where the poor jogger is lying silently. Once again, the nurse comes in and, doing her usual routine, she straightens his blanket and leaves. The man lies there, both arms missing, as well as his legs.
He's almost catatonic. And in the next scene, oh wow, it's Christopher Lee. His name in this movie is Fremont, and he's addressing a room full of military and intelligence officers. He tells them that additional aircraft would only interfere with their Air Force and radar.
During this meeting, he receives a call that one of their airmen is missing. A self-destructive aircraft malfunctioned, and the airman was captured instead of being killed as was planned.
Wow, that's really bad for the airman.
And said airman is now a prisoner of Conrad's.
He's on a cot being treated by the woman in the lab coat. Conrads enters the room. The woman says that he hasn't confessed to anything when interrogated. Conrad says that he doesn't care if this man is blind or deaf. One way or another, he'll talk.
And now Bellaver visits the morgue, along with Detective Constable Griffin, to speak with Dr. Sorel, who is examining Sylvia's body. Dr. Sorel reports her injuries are exactly like those of Eileen Stevens. Bellaver finds this fascinating because both victims' bodies were lacking blood when discovered. In Eileen's case, they assumed the blood had soaked into the ground, but this girl was found on concrete. One would expect the body to be lying in a pool of blood. "What's your answer?" asks Sorel.
Bellaver says he doesn't have an answer, but he assumes that it will happen again. DC Griffin says that they do have a lead. The girls were both picked up in clubs. Bellaver says that they'll get the perpetrator to come to them. And now we're in the club, and the Amen Corner are wailing.
After that brief aside, we're back at the police station where Helen Bradford is being fitted with a wire for her undercover assignment. Detective Sergeant Jimmy Joyce is helping her, but Griffin, who just happens to be Helen's boyfriend, doesn't like to see Joyce getting so handsy with his girl, so he takes over. Bellaver and Dr. Sorel are waiting in the car to follow them.
They're discussing two other female cops who are still out there. Dr. Sorel hopes for their sake that this is all a waste of time. Bellaver says they should get going, and they drive off.
As two cops sit in a car outside, Griffin walks Helen up to the Busted Pot Club, where the Amen Corner is yet again performing. He escorts her to the dance floor, but she tells him that nothing's going to happen with him there.
He shuffles away so Helen can dance with other suitors and scope out the club for weirdos.
It's not long before a guy tries to join her. They dance for a moment, but she's looking for someone in particular, and this isn't the guy, so she excuses herself.
Guess he's not weird looking enough. Helen is spotted by the killer, who we'll later find out is named Keith. Keith asks to buy her a drink. Helen agrees, but instead of going to the bar, the two of them head out, way out. Keith escorts her to his car, and the two officers notice. As Keith takes off, they, listening in on their conversation, follow behind.
As they drive, Helen says that she needs to go home. Keith tells her that they'll have the drink at her place then. She asks his name, and he tells her to guess. It's not Peter, that's too ordinary. It's not Michael, Jeremy, or Archibald.
That's insulting. She never does guess it. Keith says that he's going to take a shortcut across the common to get to her place. In his car, DC Griffin fumes as the man flirts with his girl. But then Keith pulls off into that deserted area again, and the cops park nearby to listen in.
No boyfriend? Keith asks Helen. She tells him that they were together, but they had a fight. From the police car, Joyce looks at Griffin, Helen's boyfriend, and giggles. You wouldn't be laughing if it were your girlfriend, snarls Griffin.
Helen says she has no idea who her boyfriend is now, but he wasn't very groovy anyway, and Joyce once again ribs Griffin.
Then things go quiet. That's a long kiss, says Joyce. We cut back to see that Helen is being strangled. Griffin is ready to move in, but the others tell him it's fine, let them have their fun. But then a gurgling sound comes over the transmitter, so they rush out to see what's going on. And what's going on is Keith is sucking the blood from Helen's wrist.
He seems drunk on blood when Griffith pulls him off her. One cop grabs Helen and carries her away and says she's all right. But when the others go to cuff Keith, he displays superhuman strength and throws off the cops.
He smacks one of them to the ground, and then Keith jumps back into the car and drives off. Bellaver arrives on the scene, and he discusses with his men what just happened when one realizes they're getting a signal from the transmitter. Turns out Helen's shoe came off and is still in the back of the convertible, so the police are able to track him, and all available cars are called in, so the chase is on, and on, and on.
From start to end, this chase scene lasts 18 minutes, which is an astounding length of time for any movie. More than Bullet and The French Connection combined.
Keith seems to be enjoying the chase as he darts through traffic, trying to shake the cars on his tail.
The cops realize that Keith is headed to the chalk quarry and follow him there. Keith parks his car by an abandoned building and then runs up into it.
The police surround the building, and a few are sent in after Keith. A few find him. He's crawling along the side of the building. Then he jumps to the ground and continues to run. He eludes even more policemen and runs into the woods as police continue to chase him on car and on foot.
They corner him at the side of a massive hill of chalk. Keith starts to climb. Bellaver yells at him to come down, but Keith ignores him. Instead, he runs up the steep angle of the hill, and the cops can't follow. When he's very far up, he turns to look at the cops, still at the ground level. And then he starts to scale a sheer cliff.
But he takes a bad step or something and tumbles down onto the ground. Right, get him, says Bellaver. A couple of his men drag the man toward the car, complaining about how heavy he is.
Bellaver says, radio the station and tell them that it's all over.
Dr. Sorel bends down to examine him. It's incredible. He's only stunned, he says.
Stunned? Bellaver tells one of the cops to cuff him to the car's bumper and says that he won't be chewing through that.
One of the men receives an update on the injured officers. Jackson is dead and Griffin is seriously injured, but is receiving medical care. No one seems to think it's necessary to keep an eye on their perpetrator, and Keith wakes up to find he's attached to the car. He wrenches his arm out of the handcuffs, and then he runs off. And the chase is on again as the police jump into their cars, and others, armed with whistles, run after the man. Bellaver, who remained behind, wonders how he could have snapped those handcuffs. He didn't, says Sorel, pointing out the severed hand still attached to the back of the car. Now Dr. Sorel has the hand in a satchel on his lap as their car is being driven in pursuit of Keith.
We see Keith running through the countryside, up and down a hill. Bellaver asks Dr. Sorel if he's going to stitch that hand back on. Sorel says such operations are rarely successful. And now there's more running and more chasing, till they drive past a field and spot Keith.
Keith runs toward a fence, but a police car cuts him off. So he turns and runs toward a stable as Bellaver and Sorel's car pulls up. They go inside where Keith is cornered. Bellaver tells one of his men to get him, and he cautiously approaches Keith, knowing that he seems to be super strong.
As the police watch, Keith opens a hatch on the floor. It's full of some strange liquid, and Keith hops into it. Bellaver orders one of his underlings to fish him out, but when the cop reaches his hand in, it starts to sizzle. It's acid. Someone takes the luckless cop away for treatment, as Bellaver and Sorel speculate on what will be left of Keith, or that cop's hand.
Then, Dr. Browning enters the building, confused as to why all these policemen are here. While the injured policeman rides off in an ambulance with Dr. Sorel, Bellaver and Joyce remain behind and follow Dr. Browning to his house to question him. First question, why is there a vat of acid on his property? Dr. Browning explains that he does cancer research and disposes of contaminated tissue in the acid to avoid the spread of bacteria. Bellaver finds it interesting that the killer would make a beeline for his place while he was being chased, and the coincidence that one of his victims worked here.
Browning says that perhaps the killer knew Eileen, and she told him about the vat of acid. But that makes no sense to Bellaver. If he knew about the acid, why would he jump in there on purpose? Browning posits that maybe it was guilt. He was subconsciously looking for a punishment that fit the enormity of his crimes.
But Bellaver still can't believe he'd willingly jumped into a vat of acid and feel no pain. But Dr. Browning suggests that this might explain his incredible strength.
When you feel nothing, the body and spirit are capable of limitless things, Browning says.
Bellaver and Joyce turn to leave, and Bellaver says at least all of them didn't go in. They still have his hand, and Dr. Browning looks concerned to hear this.
I thought his expression was inscrutable here. And now we're at the hand autopsy. Professor Kingsmill and Dr. Sorel are wrestling the hand down. They can't identify what the hand is made of. Bellaver is also there, and he's confused. It's just a hand, right? Dr. Sorel says they can't identify what the tendons and muscles are made of. They're synthetic, man-made, something like rubber. The rest of it, though, is normal flesh and blood.
They'll need to find out a lot more about this hand to figure out what's going on here. Bellaver tells them they better bring the hand in for safekeeping. If it's as unusual as they're making it out to be, it's liable to get up and walk away by itself. That night, the hand is under high security by being placed on a pedestal in the middle of a large room.
Guarded by no one.
The jogger's nurse sneaks in, still wearing her nurse's uniform. She pulls on a piece of plastic and grabs the hand. A door opens and a woman in matron's uniform enters. What do you think you're up to? Give me that at once, she says. But the nurse smacks her to the wall, snapping her spine in the process. Then the nurse casually exits with the hand in hand.
Or hand in bag. Now we're with the minister of whatever country we were at. He's begging comrades for more information from the ambassador. Conrad's is non-committal and tells him to have a safe journey to his regional meeting before disappearing into a locked chamber.
As the minister goes through the checkpoint, the border guard asks for his papers and notes that his exit visa has not been signed. The man asks if he knows who he is. He's the Minister of State, but the guard tells him to get out of the car to speak with his superiors. The minister has no time for this, so he tries to drive on through, and shots are fired and the car crashes and explodes. The border guard salutes a camera, the feed of which is being watched by Conrad's.
And now we're back in England, where the cops are taking pictures of the dead matron. They note that the hand is missing. Bellaver is there and says that this was either some kinky thing gone wrong, or we have more than one supernormal murderer on our hands. And we remain in London for the next scene. Conrad gets off a bus wearing plain clothes. We go to Fremont's office, where he gets a call, and we cut back to Conrad's, who is ducked into a phone booth. They arrange to meet by the fountain in Trafalgar Square.
Back at the police station, Bellaver updates Dr. Sorel, who is chatting with Helen.
Yay, she's okay.
And Bellaver tells them that the case has been closed. They were looking for a killer, they found him. He's dead. Case closed. But what about the other murder, asks Sorel, and the hand? Person's unknown, Bellaver says. Nothing to do officially with the other case. But what about Browning, asks Sorel. Bellaver raises his voice now. He's looked into Browning and made a fool of himself doing it. Dr. Browning has a government contract for the work he's doing, and he is above suspicion. Well, nobody told me, Sorel yells back. I did, shouts Bellaver, as Sorel stomps off.
The rest of the cops look pretty stunned. D.S. Joyce asks what the hell's bitten him? And now we're in a car. Dr. Sorel has enlisted his new friend Helen to go with him to Browning's estate. They're there in an unofficial capacity, but they both want to find out what's really going on, despite being told not to. Sorel gets out of the car as Helen lights up a cigarette. He wants a sample of that acid and tells her that if she sees anything, she's to blow the horn. And if he doesn't come back, she should drive away and go call the cops.
Sorel goes into the stable and opens the hatch, but now it's dry, there's no acid. He hears that car horn, so he runs back out, but both Helen and the car are gone. Now we're at Trafalgar Square, and Conrad's is waiting for Fremont to arrive. He does so carrying an umbrella over his shoulder. Conrad sees a car with a bunch of passengers nearby, watching. We agreed alone, he says. Fremont says that they heard so much about him, they just went to see what he looked like. Conrad tells Fremont that they have his pilot. He was flying over their airspace, and the jet did not self-destruct like it was supposed to. They have captured him, and he's alive and well. And Conrad offers to return him, unharmed and quietly, preventing national embarrassment, if that's what Fremont would like. Fremont asks the price.
Conrad says he'll return or kill the pilot, whatever Fremont wishes, in exchange for a favor. He won't explain what this means, and don't ask him, but he wants every scrap of information and evidence the police have on the so-called vampire murders. That's all? Very well, says Fremont. And now we're with Helen. She wakes up in a bed being attended by our favorite creepy nurse. Helen asks the nurse to call Superintendent Bellaver, but then realizes her arms are pinned down. But hey, at least she's still got arms.
At the police station, Bellaver is informed that a Professor Weiss has come to speak with him. Weiss is supposed to be researching violent crimes, so Bellaver agrees to see him. The professor is brought to Bellaver's office, and we recognize him as Conrad's.
Bellaver turns over all the evidence on the case and tells him where he can go to review it. Weiss says, no worries, he'll take it with him. Bellaver says, I don't care how much influence you come in here with, no one walks out of the station with police evidence. Weiss agrees, but then Vulcan nerve pinches Bellaver to death.
Dr. Sorel has made it to a phone box and calls into the police station. Detective Sergeant Jimmy Joyce takes the call. Sorel tells him to send some men over to Dr. Browning's. It's urgent, but Joyce reminds him that they've all been told to leave Dr. Browning alone. So Sorel demands to speak with Bellaver. I wish you could, says Joyce. Bellaver's dead. So Sorel is on his own. He goes to the Browning house, opens the door and enters, and he starts looking around. He goes into a room that looks like an office. There's a desk, and he starts looking through papers and notebooks. At the sound of approaching footsteps, he runs into the next room, and then Dr. Browning enters, removes his jacket, and sits down at the desk.
He looks at his papers. Does he notice something amiss? Back with Sorel, he's still poking around, and he finds an operating room. He sees that it's being monitored by a closed-circuit camera. On an observation balcony, a doctor and nurse walk by, and Sorel ducks out of the way. He keeps on exploring and finds another chamber. It looks like a morgue, but it's just for body parts, not entire bodies.
It has a bay of freezers, and inside one he finds an arm, another a leg, and in the third, a head that we recognize as that of the unfortunate jogger. As Sorel closes that door, Dr. Browning appears behind him, and he's very accommodating. He says he knows why Dr. Sorel is here. He's been riding along with the police, and that has brought him a lot of questions. Dr. Sorel admits that he had come hoping to get a sample of Dr. Browning's acid.
You want some amazing acid.
And Browning explains that, after what happened, it made more sense to bring it inside. And Dr. Browning is more than happy to show Sorel his work. He never gets the chance to show off. But if he does so, it will likely change Dr. Sorel's life forever. I want to know, says Sorel.
So Dr. Browning takes him back to the operating theater. He shows off his gizmos. With them, he can shape the laws of surgery as we know it, in search of human perfection. He shows Sorel a nude female body. Sorel asks how long she's been dead, but Dr. Browning says she has yet to live. She's been assembled part by part, organ by organ. She's a composite like Keith, the vampire killer. This is the first time they say his name. Keith was the first creation of his with autonomous functions. The others before him were nothing more than robots.
The nurse comes in to tell Browning that the next surgery will be ready in 5 minutes, and Browning invites Sorel to observe. Then the nurse goes back to Helen's room and prepares an injection, and Helen slips into unconsciousness.
Sorel says, but what you say is possible is impossible. Dr. Browning says no, the only thing impossible is your acceptance of the facts. Dr. Sorel says Browning that this is the mad scientist's dream, playing God. Browning says that God is dead. Man invented him, but doesn't need him anymore. But whatever objections Sorel has, it doesn't stop him from putting on scrubs, as Browning explains that man is God and always was. But with pollution, war, etc., civilization is driving towards extinction. Dr. Sorel thinks that this is the province of politicians, not scientists, but Browning says that we are the only ones doing anything. We? Asks Dr. Sorel.
Browning says he couldn't have done this all on his own. There aren't many like him, but a few, slowly maturing, growing like an organism. Like a super race, says Sorel. Well, yes, says Dr. Brown, but not an evil super race. Just a small group of people trying to reach a state of perfection.
Sorel asks who chooses, referencing organ transplants. Browning counters who chooses who deserves a heart, the degenerate or the artist. There are always choices made.
As they're speaking, Browning's assistant grabs the composite woman's body and carries it over to the operating table.
Browning says that our society is taking baby steps that theirs took long ago. Dr. Sorel reminds Browning that he murdered people, but Browning casually dismisses this, as the young and beautiful and even athletic will one day grow old, so why not just take their body parts?
The nurse wheels Helen in on a gurney. Sorel, seeing Helen on the gurney, says nothing, but his mind is reeling. Dr. Browning explains how he's going to remove the brain from her skull and place it into the composite. Dr. Sorel reaches for a scalpel and grabs Dr. Browning from behind, placing the scalpel at Dr. Browning's throat. Sorel demands that they untie the girl, but Dr. Browning throws Dr. Sorel off him, sending him back against the wall. Then Browning grabs Sorel's arm, forcing him to drop the scalpel. You, says Sorel. Yes, I'm a composite too, and so are both of them, he says, referring to the nurse and the assistant. And now that this has been established, they can continue with the procedure.
Surgical assistant holds Dr. Sorel's arms as Dr. Browning takes a scalpel to the composite woman's brain, as the CCTV shows us that Conrad's is coming in the front door. Dr. Browning says his surgical assistant to deal with the interruption and resumes cutting.
Sorel manages to grab yet another scalpel, and this time he uses it, attacking the nurse by stabbing her in the back. She seems annoyed by this. Dr. Browning says Dr. Sorel should know that he can't hurt her. Then Browning flings Dr. Sorel into the wall, knocking him out.
Via the CCTV, we see Conrad's punch the assistant's lights out and make his way to the operating theater. Hearing him come in, Browning and the nurse hide the automaton's body in a compartment as Conrad's blasts his way in.
Conrad's tells Browning that they've been sloppy, and news of a vampire killer has even reached his country. He says Dr. Browning should have gotten rid of Keith before things got so out of hand. Conrad's tells him that he has destroyed all the police evidence, as well as Bellaver, and now he must destroy all this.
The nurse is trying to stare Conrad's down, so Conrad's asks if she's one of them. Dr. Browning proudly says yes. Then he wallops the nurse.
Conrad's tells Browning that all positions of power must be consolidated first. In this country, politically, they are expendable. Conrad's picks up the nurse and throws her into the acid. Sorel comes too, but everyone is too busy to notice him. You've turned every scientific advance into a weapon, says Browning. You won't have me or my work. With that, he throws Conrad's across the room. The two struggle as Dr. Sorel unties Helen and walks her out of the operating theater.
Conrad's tries the Vulcan neck pinch on Dr. Browning, but he's not susceptible to it, so the fight continues.
Dr. Sorel helps Helen outside. Apparently he took the time to remove his scrubs, and Helen is wearing his jacket.
Back at the fight, somehow Browning unhands Conrad's, literally takes his hand off with a blunt instrument. Outside, Fremont is dropped off in front of the house. He sees Dr. Sorel and berates him for interfering. He says that everything is under control and tells the two of them to wait in the car while he goes in.
Meanwhile, Dr. Browning and Conrad's continue their fight. It ends with Browning throwing Conrad's into the acid. Where's Conrad's, booms a voice behind Dr. Browning, and Dr. Browning turns around and explains to Fremont that he had tried to destroy all this. He was evil and made Browning realize that they could be corrupted by too much power. Browning says they need to gather up the other composites and destroy them all before it's too late.
Fremont says it's too late now. He stares down Browning, who leans back into the acid. That was easy.
Yeah, Browning goes in almost willingly.
And then Fremont goes back to his car. Dr. Sorel asks him, "Is it all over, sir?" Fremont drones, "It is only just beginning." And then the credits roll as the Amen Corner sing the theme song again. And that's the end.
We're listening to the American International Podcast, and we're discussing Scream and Scream Again from 1970.
In the book, Witches, Bitches, and Banshees, The British Films of AIP, John Hamilton wrote that producer Milton Subotsky, who ran Amicus Films along with Max Rosenberg, wrote a script based on the novel The Disoriented Man by the pseudonymous Peter Saxon. Peter Saxon was a name used by several authors at Mayflower Books, but our sources say it was mainly the work of writer Stephen Francis with additional material from W. Howard Baker. Later, Subotsky was surprised to learn that he did not have the rights to the novel, as Rosenberg had persuaded AIP head James Nicholson to purchase them for £150.
AIP gave Gordon Hessler, who had a 3-picture deal with the company, the directing job and gave him Subotsky's script. Hessler thought it didn't do enough with the source material and tossed it, and had Chris Wicking rewrite the screenplay starting from scratch. This slight, and the fact that he was relegated to the background for a project he initiated, irritated Subotsky, who would be at odds with Hessler throughout the production.
In an interview with George Reese for the now-defunct DVD drive-in site, Hessler said of Wicking's take on the film, quote, "That was really a pulp book, a throwaway book that you read on a train. There was nothing in it, just empty pieces of action. But it was Chris who gave it a whole new level by using it as a political process of what might happen in the future. That is what made the picture. He's the one that came up with all those ideas, yet he still managed to keep the nuances of the sort of pulp fiction novel."
Wicking said in an interview that he, Hessler, Subotsky, and Deke Hayward, head of European operations at AIP, still fought over the script. "My assigned task was to stop Milton getting one single page in, because once one scene gets in, you have to take the build-up and the consequences end a lot. After 3 days, with only 50 pages of the script read, Hayward told Subotsky to leave, saying, 'Milton, can't you just shut up and go home and just produce the picture?'"
With Subotsky out of the way, Hessler and Wicking were able to make the movie what Hessler wanted. Wicking said, quote, "Gordon wanted it like a Don Siegel picture. Car chases, cops and robbers, and a bit of political subtext. The horror stuff was to keep AIP happy."
Subotsky, as producer, was able to work the financing so AIP could afford to cast not only Price, but Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in the film. He negotiated Price's salary down to $40,000 from his usual $75,000 salary, as Price was only needed for 2 weeks. That savings left funds to hire Christopher Lee for 3 days and Cushing for 1.
Amicus got financing from Hayward for the film's $350,000 budget, and shooting began in May of 1969 at Shepperton Studios, with some scenes shot in Trafalgar Square and most others in Surrey, including Chertsey, Box Hill, Betchworth Quarry, and Shepperton High Street. The club called the Busted Pot in the film was actually Hatchett's Playground, a West End nightclub. The scene with the jogger at the beginning was shot in Putney Common in London, and part of the extensive car chase scene was shot on the Alpine Circuit at Millbrook Proving Ground. Filming wrapped after a month.
According to an interview with Christopher Lee in the Christopher Lee Film Encyclopedia, the characters were going to be revealed as aliens in the movie's climax, but all connections to that fact were cut out of the movie before it was released, leaving the enigmatic villains' backgrounds unexplained. The edits also cut scenes of actors Julian Holloway and David Lodge as police detectives, though they are still listed in the credits.
We did see Julian Holloway, though. That's Griffin. But maybe they cut some scenes. Scream and Scream Again marked the first time that Peter Cushing, Vincent Price, and Christopher Lee appeared in the same feature film. But in Scream and Scream Again, the trio shared no scenes together. Cushing, brought in at the last minute for one day's shooting to provide AIP with extra star power, appears in only a brief 3-minute scene. Lee and Price have more screen time apiece, but share only a brief scene towards the film's climax.
The band singing the movie's theme song is Amen Corner, who appears themselves in the club scenes. Soon after crooning Scream and Scream Again in the film, singer Andy Fairweather Lowe left the band for a solo career.
According to Hamilton's book, which we used extensively here, Subotsky continued to plague Hessler, showing up at his office at Shepperton Studios and then wandering over to the sound stages from there. After a few such visits, Hayward had Subotsky thrown off the set. Hessler said that Subotsky was, quote, making suggestions to the crew, talking to the cast. It wasn't helpful. Subotsky was similarly banned from the editing booth when the film was in post-production after offering to edit the film to have a more linear through line.
Of all Gordon Hessler's films for AIP, Scream and Scream Again received the fewest edits, minor cuts to lines of dialogue and edits to improve the speed and flow. According to Hamilton, Hessler said, "I know Sam didn't understand it. He didn't see the point of cutting it."
Scream and Scream Again was released in the UK in January of 1970 and in the United States in February of that same year. In Great Britain, it was paired with Hell's Angels 69, and in the US, it was billed with Spirits of the Dead in some markets.
AIP recommended theater owners schedule a midnight screening for Scream and Scream Again, and to be sure to insert the word warning into advertising material, and to use the gimmick of having a nurse on duty to aid those overcome by fright. Anyone fainting due to shock and horror during the performance could be issued a faint check so they could return for another viewing.
They also suggested that the local radio stations have a contest where DJs would give away tickets to callers who could name all of Price's horror film appearances from his, at the time, 100 prior film roles. I saw another interview where I guess that there were only 10 horror film roles at this time. That seems pretty low. The DJs could also hold a scream-off, where a select group of callers would scream at the top of their lungs on air, and a panel of judges would select the best of the bunch, giving away tickets to all contestants.
AIP arranged for Paperback Library to publish Saxon's book under the title Scream and Scream Again to go with the film's release. Taglines for Scream and Scream Again include, "Here is the horror that nightmares are made of."
Torture and terror run rampant.
Triple distilled horror, as powerful as a vat of boiling acid.
He's going to make somebody out of every body he meets.
Never before such blood-chilling horror.
Shock after shock to leave you numb with terror.
Composite beings. They live, they love, they kill, but they cannot die.
This girl wasn't born, she was assembled, part by part, piece by piece, from living human flesh. Only boiling acid could stop her unearthly desires.
Half synthetic, half human, you cannot kill her. Only boiling acid will destroy her deadly parts and halt her unearthly lusts.
That acid is doing a lot here. Scream and Scream Again was quite successful for AIP, scoring $1,271,000 in rental for its North American release. Austrian director Fritz Lang was reportedly a fan. This info reportedly comes from LA Times film critic Kevin Thomas. And in Germany, the film was released under the title, translated into English, The Living Corpses of Dr. Mabuse, to great success. In the German release, Vincent Price's character was called Dr. Mabuse.
I think Bucket of Blood was a Mabuse movie in Germany.
Yeah, they made that weird connecting segment.
Thomas effusively praised Scream and Scream Again in his review, saying it was far scarier than anything any Victorian master of the macabre could conjure up. It is a superb piece of contemporary horror, a science fiction tale infinitely more terrifying than any of the gothic witchery of Rosemary's Baby. It is a minor masterwork of style and suspense so unusual and so all of a piece that it can't really be reviewed without spoiling its impact. He concludes by saying quite possibly Scream and Scream Again is the best film ever produced by American International.
Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune felt differently, writing, quote, "We already have a film that begs to be included in our annual Worst 20 list. This is a violent and sick film. Dismemberment is the main course. Bloodsucking is the appetizer." But he added, quote, "Fans of Vincent Price will be delighted with at least one portion of his dialogue. Price is noted for his ability to segue from horror to civility in one sentence."
Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times called Scream and Scream Again Godard for the masses, likening Hessler's directing style to Godard's for its pure cinema film divorced from storyline. Ebert wrote, "This is another of those absurd Vincent Price horror movies, impossible to dislike because they ask only that you share their sense of the absurd. The fascinating thing about this one is that it makes absolutely no sense at all until maybe the last 10 minutes. None. There is no way to follow the storyline, and if audiences like it, that's only because they like whatever happened to be on the screen at that moment. If I attempted a plot summary, you'd suspect I have a bottle of gin in my bottom desk drawer."
The Box Office Magazine review said, "Keeping the elements of suspense going until the typically British detective mystery moved along with statistical regularity, director Hessler, mixing the chase with Michael Gothard's believable psycho character, brings in his terror element in the smoothness of a bizarre vampire killing. As in all good mystery horror stories, audiences will find some of their questions answered in this film."
Joe Baltaki in the Philadelphia Evening News wrote in his review that since the tag Frankenstein is somewhat outdated for the sophisticated space-age 1970s, the movie refers to such creatures as composites. This description may sound more educated, but the film definitely isn't.
Howard Thompson in the New York Times wrote, "Scream and Scream Again proceeds to unwind British style, crisply, puzzlingly, and with some restraint. The plot begins to loop into a good tight knot after the director bears down hard and graphically on the countryside pursuit by the police of a young mod-type killer. But with the murder of the police inspector, the picture slouches into standard fare and ends up in yet another mad scientist's lair. The cast do well enough when the movie stays on the right track, but it manages to collapse almost triumphantly."
Michael Billington in the Birmingham Post in England said of all the films he reviewed that week, he got the most pleasure out of Scream and Scream Again, which shows a good deal of directional flair and cunning. Christopher Wicking's adroit screenplay first grips one's attention by presenting a series of apparently unrelated facts and then leaving one to figure out the hidden connection. What makes this movie better than most horror films is the fact that the violence generally takes place off screen and that the movie has a built-in awareness of its own absurdity. Gordon Hessler has worked on both The Bob Hope Show and The Hitchcock Hour. Here he has definitely managed to combine elements of both of them.
Robert Bufton in Birmingham's Sunday Mercury wrote, "It was bound to happen, the revival of the Frankenstein-type horror grade, messing about with people's bodies and nasty things like that. The old formula has been dusted off, tarted up a bit, and churned out in a more topical fashion as Scream and Scream Again. It's all there, murder, rape, and other hideous happenings to delight us. Scream and Scream Again is honest-to-goodness horror, with guaranteed seat-gripping effects."
Clyde Gilmore in the Toronto Telegram called Scream and Scream Again a smasher, one of the best things of its kind I've ever come across, not merely this year, but any year since I started watching movies. The credit obviously goes to the direction of Gordon Hessler and writing by Christopher Wicking. Hessler proves in Scream that, with a good script, he is a suspense maestro in the genuine Hitchcock tradition, although perhaps favoring a somewhat gorier approach than the old master.
That's 3 countries heard from.
So Cheryl, Scream and Scream Again has kind of a reputation with it, and it's not that often we find ourselves talking about a narrative film with such a confusing narrative.
It's maybe the most confusing narrative of any movie I've ever seen. It gives you whiplash. One minute you're at a murder scene, the next minute you're in some vaguely Eastern European country. There are people who aren't really introduced. There's strange murders. There's a vampire. This movie has everything, and yet none of it makes sense.
Yeah, I think there were actually entire sections of this movie that could be cut without really changing the storyline that much.
Like all the parts with Conrads.
If
you take that out, it's just a straight horror film. Maybe a murder mystery / horror.
Right, so that adds the political intrigue that we wouldn't otherwise have. But do we need it?
I think we would if it melded together better, but I'm not sure that it does. The explanatory part of that is so brief and still confuses me. I thought about it, and it just doesn't jive with me.
Yeah, the first time I watched this, I thought what they really needed was to hire Dick Miller, pin him to the wall, and have him explain the whole plot, a la The Terror.
I just wonder what people thought about it when they watched. It's your average movie viewer, not your critics, not your Siskel and Ebert and Kevin Thomas. But what did the average Joe or Josephine think when they watched this movie? Were they awed by the revelation at the end, or were they just like, oh, that was confusing, let's go home?
Well, I can tell you how I felt, because I first watched this one about 30 years ago. I had Scream and Scream Again on VHS as part of the Vincent Price collection from Orion Home Video. And I put it in one day, and I did not like this movie at all.
I felt the same way the first time I watched it. I was really dreading the second time we had to watch it because I just felt it was unnecessarily confusing. The scenes were very short and made no sense until, I guess, the very end, if you want to call that sense. It just seemed so unnecessarily obtuse.
But what I think is unique about this film is it's one that gets better every time you watch it, because the first time you're asking yourself all these questions and not paying attention to the movie that much because it's so confusing. But once you know that you're going to be confused anyway, and you're over the disappointment that Vincent Price and Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing are hardly in the movie, even though they're first, second, and third billed.
They're never together.
You can kind of get more into the procedural story, and regardless, the political stuff still isn't going to make sense because that's the science fiction element. It doesn't really fit in.
No, I think I would have really enjoyed not just one movie, but a series of movies with Detective Superintendent Bellaver, because he's a great character. He's really fun to watch, and them closing in on the murderer, catching him, vampire or whatever he is, I thought that was the best part of the movie.
He does seem very natural. They had that scene where he's messing around with that sandwich, and it's pointless, but it's worth mentioning, not just because it's happening, but it's so unusual to be a focal point, and it is the focal point of that brief scene.
The chicken died an unnatural death. Yeah, there's another scene where they bring in some guy on drugs, and it's just a throwaway scene. But the hippie guy goes, "I love you, man." And Bellaver says, "I'm mad about you and all," and just keeps walking. And it's hilarious. He's so good in this. I was extremely bummed when he got killed. Took a lot of the joy out of this movie for me.
One thing that stood out about watching this movie was the scenes in the club. You can hear the music, but you could also hear the people talking. They're not raising their voices. They're talking at normal low levels, and you could still hear them. You can actually hear them dancing. You hear them shuffling around.
Well, they should have made the music a little bit louder for those scenes.
And Andy Fairweather Lowe, who was the lead singer of Amen Corner, he mentioned this in the notes that he went solo not long after this was filmed, and he went on to become a tour guitarist for Eric Clapton.
I really like the band. I like those songs.
You don't really see the band in this. You kind of see him, and he's
wailing.
He's wailing, but he's also barely lit. He's the only one you see, and nobody else is visible in the film. This is the second movie I could think of where Vincent Price keeps a vat of acid in his house.
First for AIP, though.
First for AIP, yeah.
Acid and Vincent Price go together like peanut butter and jelly. It is an unusual way to kill people or commit suicide.
Do you think there would be a way to make this film less confusing?
I think it would take a substantial rewrite with the political element. The other country, I mean, we all know what fascism is. Some of us are living it at this very moment. But to tie it in better with the race of superhumans. It's supposed to be a big surprise that Conrads is a composite person, I guess. But it really wasn't. He had the superhuman nerve-pinching strength.
Well, I think in the original story, he was an alien.
I don't know if that would have helped any.
I think that would have just made it too bizarre. It's bizarre enough as it is. And it obviously isn't taking place in our timeline because this fascist country that we don't know the name of doesn't exist currently.
Maybe it's America.
Maybe.
The America of the near future. Well, it's difficult to understand how many composite people there are in positions of power because Dr. Browning says that there are few of us, but we're growing. And Conrads wants to consolidate the positions of power, but they don't really give a scale of how this is globally or even in Europe.
Right. This is just one small operation that's getting out of hand, so they have to clean up the mess. But we have to assume that there are other countries that are more successful and neat in their composite building.
I'm surprised they didn't account for a few outliers, that there would be some rogue actors. But I guess that's what Browning was supposed to do. He was supposed to kill those. It just seems like the process is pretty slow going. And by necessity, it's messy because you have to kidnap and dismember people in order to achieve this superhuman race.
And speaking of kidnapping, how did they get the jogger? Was he poisoned? Were they planning on that man in particular, or did they just happen upon him? We don't know.
They just found some guy with a Charlie horse in the park and threw him into a car.
Because he collapses and he wakes up in their hospital bed.
None of this is ever really explained.
No, I'm positing the question to you.
How am I supposed to answer it? I'm as confused as you are. Why was Keith a vampire? Why did he have that compulsion if he's not a real person? Did they just not put enough blood in him for his own liking?
And the police weren't complaining about how heavy he was, but when Browning's assistant dragged the female composite across the room, he lifted her like she was nothing. Is it because she wasn't finished yet?
I think so.
Oh, okay.
Well, they did say that the composite hand was very strong, and when Browning asked why it had blood on it, they said because the skin of it was real and the blood inside it was real, but the tendons and muscles were artificial. So maybe the blood volume, that's what does it? None of this is explained. You have to try to piece it together for yourself.
You know, even if they did, it's still science fiction, and whatever they said, you just have to go with. They could say whatever they want and say, oh, okay, I guess that's what happened then, because that's how movies work.
But then if you want somebody to be talking about your movie 50 years later, maybe you should put a little more thought into it.
We didn't really mention what anybody was wearing aside from when Sorel put on and took off his scrubs. But Keith, when he goes clubbing, is wearing this lavender puffy satin shirt.
With ruffles. Well, this was 1970. He was a mod kid. I mean, this was the time when David Bowie was Ziggy Stardust. Not exactly that time, it was near. So this was kind of the look for clubbing at that time. We're in London's fashionable West End, so that doesn't surprise me at all.
For clubbing, yeah, but he winds up on a police chase.
He didn't know that was going to happen when he got dressed.
With one arm, so he gets blood all over this shirt. And he destroys it in acid.
I'm sure he was really sorry about that. I wish that our nurse had more to do. I guess she was just a brainless robot, more or less, kind of an attack dog at some point. It would have been more interesting if the female characters had had a little more to do. But at least WPC, Helen had a pivotal role.
Well, the nurse is given a name in the credits as Jane, but nobody ever addresses her, which I guess is fine because she's just going to ignore you anyway. But if it wasn't for that, we would never know her name.
A lot of people, we only get their names from the credits or at the very end of the movie. The jogger has a name, but no one ever addresses him as Ken Spartan.
Nobody really addresses him at all. So the only person he interacts with is the nurse, and she never interacts with him except for pulling his blanket up over him.
And then Conrad's first victim, he misnames as Salas, which is the name of the actor. He's supposed to be Schweitz. You could say the same about the butler, some of the cops, and the Alman Corner, never named in the film.
So we did a Gordon Hessler movie previously. We did The Oblong Box, which also featured Vincent Price and Christopher Lee. And in that movie, they didn't really meet up either.
Did they not like each other?
No, they were actually really good friends in real life. They share a birthday.
And Peter Cushing's birthday is one day off. It does give the impression, though, that they have to be kept separate for their own good.
One time they share a scene and Price winds up dunking himself in a vat of acid.
That was such a weird thing. We get a big close-up of his face. His eyes are wide. And then he just sort of leans back like he's getting into the spa. And then he kills himself for reasons I cannot fathom.
I'm wondering if there are other composites in this movie that we don't even know about. The ones we know about are Keith, Browning, Jane, and Rogers. Obviously, Conrad's, because he was able to fight with Browning hand to hand. And Fremont may very well be one as well.
I thought he might be. He was very no-nonsense. But he didn't physically fight anybody, so it's kind of hard to tell.
So I'm wondering if there was anybody in the police force.
Well, they do mention that the higher-ups are telling them to close this investigation. So I would bet money that whoever that higher-up is also a composite person. And maybe the prime minister as well. Goes all the way to the top.
I guess we'll never know. This movie leaves you with so many unanswered questions.
I know you said you wanted to read the book, but I don't think the book is going to be much help because of how much the movie deviates from the book. It changes the ending fundamentally.
Well, plus the book has the aliens in it.
Well, that's what I meant. And Christopher Lee's character isn't even in the book. There's no figuring him out via the text of the book.
So, Cheryl, as confusing as this has been, how are you going to rate Scream and Scream Again using our AIP scale where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic?
I totally agree with you that it gets better the more times you watch it, because after the first watch, I thought this was a terrible movie and I never wanted to see it again. But of course, we had to watch it a second time. And the second time, we do it slower, more deliberate, more thoughtfully, because we're trying to understand it so that we can explain what's going on to people listening, just in case you haven't seen it before and you don't want to watch it for yourself. So once we went through that process and all the research that I did on the movie, reading the book, The Witches, Bitches, and Banshees, another book on Gordon Hessler's work, doing that made me feel a lot more positively about the movie. I don't know if I can bring it up to an A movie, but I do believe that this is one that people need to watch. I think they should just prepare themselves to be extremely confused and that they probably need to watch it more than one time like we did. So I'll grade it an I if you just watch it once. But I think if you watch it a second time, you will probably give it an A. So I'm going to give it a low A, but an A as well, or an awesome movie. Because as weird and inexplicable as it is, I think it's still a really good watch. What do you think?
Well, like you, the first time I was not impressed. And even the second time, the first time I watched it for this podcast, I was hoping to be a little more enlightened, but it still didn't do anything for me. But then I started doing the research and watched it again, and I realized that there's a good movie hidden in here. I just don't think that we have all the layers peeled enough to get to it. So I'm not going to give this one an A. I'm tempted, but I think it's just an I intermediate. It is hurt by the fact that you can't just watch it once and enjoy the film, because most people, I think, will not like this on the first viewing and may not give it a second viewing, because why would you watch a movie that you didn't like?
I wouldn't blame them.
So I think it might take some convincing for people to watch this a second time. But if they're willing to go that route, they will be rewarded. And I think this is one that just improves with every viewing, because I think there's a lot of little things in this film that you pick up on when you're not paying attention or disappointed that Peter Cushing is dead already. But I don't think it's up to an A status for me. I'm going to give it intermediate.
I think if they took out the Conrad's part and they beefed up the vampire murder mystery and gave Bellaver a lot more scenes, I think this would be an easy A for a lot of people. Most people even. The plot is not well woven together, but I still think there's a lot of good stuff here. Even as an A, it would be a very low A.
Having graded the movie, where might people go to find out more about this film?
Well, fans of weird British mysteries and horror should investigate our website. At AIPpod.com, you will find our entire library of episodes dating back over 3 years. You can also dig into our social media links or reach out to us using the site's contact form. We'd love to hear what movie you are most looking forward to us reviewing, hear your comments on something we've said, or anything else you'd like to tell us. Maybe you can help us find some AIP movies missing from our library. Check out the list of what we're looking for. While you're on our site, you can check out our ever-expanding database of the entire American International Pictures catalog, which we are adding to every week. We have lobby cards, posters, trailers, and other advertising materials on display, and you can see where to watch the films we cover. While you're on our site, visit our store to purchase one of our items. You can get some cool gear and help keep the podcast coming at you until we run out of AIP films. Once again, you can find all of that at AIPpod.com.
Well, now that we've screamed
and screamed again,
that will top off this episode of American International Podcast. Until next time, I'm Jeff Markin.
I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in. Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.